I think you can get away with one loss to a quad three and one loss to a quad four team. I don't think you can get away with any more than that. And that's the whole body of work thing there.
Greetings and salutations, and welcome to the Yacht Coaches Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Keith Adams. A little technical difficulty, that's okay. And on today's Throwdown Thursday edition in segment one, we're getting closer and closer to March Madness, and we're going to talk about what the committee is looking for in your favorite team. In segment two, we're going to talk about the women's game and the house case from the women's game perspective. And in segment three, we're going to talk all things political in terms of making sure all voices are heard as we transition to this changing and evolving time. But first, let's get to the net rankings. Number one on the men's side, Auburn, Duke, Houston, Florida, and Tennessee. It was quite a whooping Duke put on Illinois. Mid-majors, Gonzaga, St. Mary's. Who won that one last night, Robert?
I don't know.
That's all right. We'll figure that one out. I know they did play. VCU is 3, Utah State's 4, and UC San Diego's 5. Teams to watch. The Maryland Terps. Need to watch them. Baylor, BYU. I had that down in the early notes, so I'm not a front runner. And VCU, you do need to watch. But our story. Go ahead, Robert.
St. Mary's. St. Mary's is, they have swept Gonzaga.
They swept them this year?
They swept them this year. They're 25-4. Gonzaga will not win the regular season conference in the West Coast. But,
Yeah.
Whatever the net says, I guess, right?
Parity is your friend, and next week I'm sure the net will say something else. Mm-hmm. But this is what the committee is looking for, and I'm glad I got our favorite administrator, Robert Abney, with us today. So Samford, men's committee member, the AD, Martin Newton, talked to Andy Katz, Miss Andy, seeing him on a regular basis, and they talked about when selecting teams for the NCAA tournament as a member of the men's selection committee, what do they focus on? And he said, I try to focus as much on anything in terms of the full body of work from the first game to the last game. So we try to remind our fans that stop telling me you won 8 out of the last 10, because that piece doesn't matter. So again, how did you do throughout the body of the season? Another thing they look for is who they play. Did they play a cupcake non-conference schedule, or did they try to play people in the non-conference to get ready for the tournament? He also explained that he's a believer that experience and guards take you a long way in the tournament. So when they're watching games, are they guard-driven? Are they senior-driven? But now, Robert, seniors aren't really seniors because they've played in 2, sometimes 3, sometimes 4 different schools. So, Robert, as you hear what the committee is looking for, any thoughts you have and any team you think we should pay extra attention to based on that credential and criteria?
I don't know as I put a whole lot of credence into the whole non-conference schedule thing for the Power 4 teams. For those guys, for the Big East, I don't think it matters. I don't think their non-conference schedule matters because of who they're playing during their conference season. For schools like, Gonzaga, St. Mary's, for schools like Utah State, New Mexico, for other schools, VCU, for schools of that caliber at that level, yeah, I think the non-conference schedule matters. I think it matters a lot for those guys, and they really do look at the body of work because you can't have. I think you can get away with one loss to a quad 3 and one loss to a quad 4 team. I don't think you can get away with any more than that. And that's the whole body of work thing there. And that's tough for those teams because they're going to play those teams in their conference on a regular basis. And you know very well as a coach, man, it's hard to keep your kids locked in and focused and understanding that, hey, we can't, we're not going to call this a must win, but it's a can't lose. We can't lose this game. So I guess, that's what he's looking for, but I can't help but feel like for the Power Four schools, the Big East, those guys, the rules are a little different.
Yeah, and to your point, right now New Mexico is 42 in the net. They're 21-5, 6-3 on the road, 2-1 in neutral site games. That's really, really good. However, Vanderbilt is 43. They're in the SEC. They're 18-9. They're 2-6 on the road, 3-1 in neutral. But again, they're going to have more bites at the apple to play somebody to have an impact win where New Mexico can lose. And then you look at a team like Carolina, who's 45 in the net, which means they're still hanging around, but they're 17-11, 4-6 on the road. And then the big one, they're 1-10 in quad one games, where New Mexico is 3-2 in quad one games, and Vanderbilt's 3-8 in quad one games. But the SEC might end up, hoarding 10, 11, 12 bids.
Well, and like, and New Mexico lost to Boise State on, I want to say last Thursday. And they finished with San Diego State, Nevada, and a couple other teams. And they can't lose any of those games. I was looking at their schedule. They had Boise, San Diego State, and then 3 other whoever's, and they cannot lose for the remainder of their schedule. And they really probably need to get to the conference championship game. And if that doesn't happen, they're not going to be in. It's not going to happen for them.
And it's going to be their fault, unfortunately, because the rules are not hidden. As we told you in football, you got to read the questions to the test. So we're really going to start arguing. We're not on this show, but the national media is going to start arguing about these penny-ante, middle-of-the-road power conference teams where if you play New Mexico on a neutral site or a team like that, that's going to be a better ball game than you think. So with that, in segment 2, we're going to break down the women's game, talk about the women's net, and also some questions that they have about the pending House settlement. We'll be right back on the Odd Coaches Podcast.
This is Dr. Keith Adams, president of the CKA Safe Project, with a question for you. Are you passionate about supporting student athletes? If so, then become an official member of the CKA Safe Project and make a difference today. With your membership, you'll be able to help us provide essential academic and athletic support to underserved communities nationwide. Join us in empowering student athletes to achieve their full potential, both on and off the field. Together, we can build a brighter future through education and sports. Visit ckasafeproject.org and choose your membership level now. $25 is a bronze level membership, $50 is a silver level membership, and $100 is a gold level membership. Be a part of the change. Become a member of the CKA Safe Project today.
Welcome back to the Odd Coaches Podcast in segment 2. Let's get to the women's net rankings. Women's season has been top heavy, very good games, and number 1 is UConn, as they should be. UConn went into South Carolina and took their lunch money and left. Man, but South Carolina's good there too. Texas is 3, Notre Dame is 4. I think they have the best backcourt in the country. And UCLA is 5. Mid-majors, Robert, Harvard is the best mid-major, and they're ranked 32 in the net. Wow. Richmond, 2, they're ranked 34. Columbia's 3, they're ranked 42. South Dakota State, who's been good for some time, 43 in the net, and George Mason, right around the corner from me, ranked 44.
So
It's going to be hard, man.
two Ivies, one of them's not getting in.
They got to get both of them in. They're following the rules. They're in the top 40, 45.
One of them's not getting in.
They got to get both of them in there. All right. Teams to watch. TCU's playing well. So TCU has the Haley girl, and this is her third school now, right? Because she went to Louisville,
Haley,
LSU,
yeah,
and now TCU. So even in the women's game, a lot of frequent flyer miles, Oklahoma and NC State. But the story of the week we got next. Former NBA PA Executive Director Michelle Roberts has co-written a letter to U.S. District Court Judge Claudia Wilkin expressing concern about the House settlement. To paraphrase, broadly, we believe that the settlement's produces a newer version of the old status quo where athletes have more money but no more power. Specifically, we question whether the settlement meets Rule 23 requirements because, one, it imposes a revenue sharing cap that may be unlawful. Two, acts as a collective bargaining agreement without including the laborers in the negotiations. Three, it impedes rather than promotes future collective bargaining for athletes with employee status and protectable rights under the National Labor Relations Act. 4, may lead to federal legislation that makes defendants' regulatory authority unchallenged and permanently impairs athletes' rights. 5, preserves and extends the NCAA amateurism-based regulatory authority. 6, uses Carter's pay-for-play claims to serve primarily strategic purposes rather than genuine compensatory purposes. And last, but certainly not least, unfairly excludes Division I men's players from class representation. Robert, as a former administrator, as a former athletic director, you understand Title IX and the needs to have that balance and that fairness. When you see someone with the cachet of Michelle Roberts pointing things out extremely clearly to the court, what are your thoughts with your administrative hat?
Well, we've talked about how Title IX fits into all of this. And remember that the primary concept there is equitable, is equity versus equality, right? And we know that with all the NIL money and all that kind of stuff, that has kind of taken a back seat. And obviously that's something that the judge needs to consider because Title IX is federal law. I also think that there's an interesting point here in the sense that talking about we're just going to give them the money. We're not giving them a voice. They're not, they're still not considering them employees. They're just saying, okay, you wanted to get paid. Now you're getting paid. And we're going to keep doing whatever it is we do now that we've paid you. As we've said many times, none of us knows what's going to happen with any of this. They opened that Pandora's box and you can't get all that stuff back in. And there is so much with all this. I don't think any of us knows where it's going to end. I don't think any of us knows how it's going to turn out. And things like this are going to keep popping up for the foreseeable future because, again, there's so much. It's a lot.
Yeah, and speaking of this a lot piece, a group of 120 active women's basketball student athletes have formed a players association and joined the United College Athletes Association, a nonprofit organization that the Washington Post Jesse Doherty points out is not a union. In late January, Robert, the players sent separate letters to SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey and Big Ten Commissioner Tony Petitti requesting a meeting to discuss a potential partnership for rulemaking and related matters, and both leagues refused to meet. Petitti, in his response, wrote, "Given the personal relationships on campus, we encourage athletes to communicate directly with their coaches and athletic staff, who then coordinate on issues concerning with the conference." USC student athlete Dominique Darius found the response unsatisfactory and said, "My issue with that is that my coach does not have the power to negotiate on revenue sharing and with the whole institution in the NCAA. So telling us to talk to our coaches is just a misdirect of like, okay, just go ahead, go over there. We make all this money and you sit there and you run us in circles." Robert, they asked for a meeting. You didn't give them a meeting. What is your reaction to that as we close this segment?
Have the meeting.
Have the meeting.
Have the meeting.
Have the meeting.
Just talk to them. Just talk to them. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to do anything. But you do have to have the meeting. Because, I mean, who comes out looking poorly in this situation? The young student athletes who are trying to advocate for themselves, or the old guys running the conferences? That's easy. Have the meeting.
Send some representative on behalf of the whatever. We'd like to take this back and we'll take what you say under consideration and whatever. But to tell them to go through the process that has not worked, and this is why we're in this boat, that's just bad optics. It's just bad optics. We're in education. We tell kids and we teach them intentionally. Here's how advocacy works. The course I teach is national, state, and local government. And part of it is just, this is how the system works. Schoolhouse Rock, how a bill becomes, just the basics. So if they have enough in them to just simply write you formally and say, we'd like to talk about these things, and you say, go through your process that hasn't worked for you, that's just not good, man. So I'm in agreement. Have the meeting.
Have the meeting.
And there's the new t-shirt. All right, it's segment 3. We're going to talk even more about the ramifications of all of these things going on and how it affects the college professors and the college students and the college institution. We'll be right back on the iCoaches podcast. Have the meeting.
This is Dr. Keith Adams, president of the CKA SAFE Project and author of Finding the Balance, My Personal Journey to Academic and Athletic Success. This book is your key to unlocking the secrets of being a successful student athlete. Drawing from my 30-year career as a teacher and coach, this instructional guide offers a unique perspective on achieving success in both academics and athletics. With over 15 personal stories and insightful anecdotes, Finding the Balance is a must-read for student athletes, parents, coaches, teachers, and administrators. Visit www.ckasafeproject.org to get your copy and start finding the balance today.
Welcome back to the Odd Coaches podcast, and in segment 3. Okay, budget cuts are real. There is a lot going on in the world, in the United States, federal agencies, and our heart goes out to anybody and everybody affected. Our role here is to talk about the impact it has on colleges and universities because we cover college athletics. So with that being said, colleges and universities across the country are implementing cost-cutting measures and hiring freezes in response to uncertainty regarding the future of federal funding. Inside Higher Ed's Josh Moody pointed out that these measures aren't limited just to smaller schools. Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, stands to lose $30 to $35 million annually under these proposed changes. Northwestern is making a series of cost-cutting moves, namely freezing hiring compensation. University officials are just concerned about all of these different cuts. So with that being said, the MAC, the MAC, our favorite Tuesday night MACtion, their Council of Student Athletes, sent a letter to Congress specifying that they don't want to be classified as employees. From the letter, if student athletes were classified as employees, the focus could shift away from academics, leading to questions about whether attending classes or pursuing a degree would even be required. And finally, before I get your thoughts, Robert, the SWAC commissioner, Charles McClendon, MEAC commissioners, Sonja Stills, and the SIAC, the Division II conference, and the CIAA, the Division II HBCU conference, sent a letter to members of the Congressional Black Caucus urging them to take actions to protect the future of HBCUs. A primary concern involves student athlete employment, and the commissioners argue that, unlike major athletic programs, most HBCUs do not generate significant revenue from sports and rely on institutional funding. The commissioners also highlighted the disparities caused by varying state laws that affect NIL. Robert, you've got schools losing federal funding. You have smaller conferences saying we don't want to be employees, and we have HBCUs saying we don't have the revenue that these other people are having. So you're having all of these conversations and you're not hearing what we need. This is across your desks. You're our administrator. What do you think?
To me, this is one of those unintended consequences of all of this. You know, I don't want to get into the politics of all of this, but I mean, what's happening at the federal level, just in terms of money potentially going away, I don't think any of that was well thought out. I think it's just what has happened is you have lots of people who all of a sudden are like, hey, we didn't, that wasn't going to happen to us, and now it has. And I mean, the again, when we opened that Pandora's box, this is one of those things that it's like, well, what did you think was going to happen? Because you're right, you have all of these schools still trying to figure out NIL, still trying to figure out, we have to compete at some level. We have to offer our student athletes something. And then you have all the uncertainty about federal funds, and it's like, well, we can't spend that because we don't know if we're going to have it. And I mean, I see one of the unintended consequences of this going to be is if that federal funding really does dry up for all these colleges and universities, it would not shock me at all if you see a series of schools actually closing their doors because they don't have the money to operate, and they're dependent upon that federal funding. And I don't know, I don't know what's going to happen. It's great that they're asking Congress for relief, but I mean, I don't see that happening. Congress can't agree on anything. Much less, hey, let's give some money to HBCUs to make sure that they keep their doors open and can pay their athletes NIL that we haven't done anything
figured out
either.
Yeah.
So it's a really tough situation for these schools. I hope that the federal government finds its way to maybe not restoring all of the funding, but at least restoring some of that funding so that schools can operate. Because once you get down to the HBCUs and down into Division II, Division III, those kinds of schools, those students really are student athletes. They are there for an education, and we need to make sure that opportunity doesn't go away.
Yeah, and to your point, one, CKA, we are nonpartisan. We live in this world, and a lot of small colleges and universities over the last 5 years post-COVID have closed. That's a real thing that has happened. I have the opportunity as both president of the CKA Safe Project as well as president-elect of the Drake Group to sit in on a lot of meetings and talk to a lot of people and just try to help navigate this. But one, higher ed has been sleepwalking. And in public and private conversations, higher ed hasn't really paid attention to all of this, and that's their fault. You get enamored with your football team winning or not winning or whatever, and we've got to do school. And the further you go away from just doing school, because doing school is hard enough as it is. So that you've been sleepwalking, and now you're not prepared, and we're supposed to be prepared. We're supposed to anticipate as administrators the next thing that are going on. Second, education is a space that's hard to make lasting changes. It is. It is a hard space to make a change stick. And currently the administration, and they have the right to do this because they're in charge, they're blitzing everything so you can't react. It is a strategy businesses use since the beginning of time. So if you study business, this is not new.
Right.
People make changes, people eliminate offices, people do whatever. They just haven't done it with the speed that the current administration is doing. That's the best way I could say it. And the Drake Group, who we work with, they are in agreement that student athletes can't be employees, in part because if Robert's a junior and he's lobbying for this, that, and the other, by the time whatever happens, as I mentioned, education is a space that's hard to make lasting change. He's gone, she's gone. So what you want to do, and this is now Keith Adams, is you want to find out what student athletes want. Just like you do in high school, just like you do with SGA, just like you do whatever, and you try to make these changes and adjustments and find some type of common ground, which is why we said in the previous segment, take the meeting, hear from your clientele. So this is a crazy, strange situation that is not going to be solved anytime soon, which takes us to the Articles of Confederation. You've got state after state continuing to make laws that have to be followed because it's national, state, and local government. If the national federal government hadn't said anything, then it's up to the states to make whatever rules. And hey, articles didn't work. So let's go back on the field. The SEC is talking about reimagining the football championship, Robert. They're talking about having a play-in game, and we have no budget for academics, but they're actually talking about a play-in game. So hear me out, okay? According to media reports, that's not the only idea they're having, but the Big Ten was also talking about it. So while they have two teams playing for the conference title, something like 3 would play 6 and 4 would play 5, and that would be used to determine the top 4 in terms of a play-in game. Any thoughts to that in terms of, is that a good idea, bad idea, or what are we doing?
You mean aside from the fact that the SEC had a 6-way tie for 4th place this past season? How you picking how you sorting those guys out? I mean, these conferences are immense, and they not everybody plays everybody, and how do you break those ties?
ninth SEC game is coming. That's what the rumors are having. So maybe that will break ties by having. But if you have the ninth SEC game, and then you come up with some type of agreement to play Big Ten schools, and then you have your little state U game, that
they're
really
not
box
gonna
out
agree-
everybody.
They're not going to agree to anything where they wind up with less than 7 home games, because, I mean,
Yes.
they're not going to agree to that. And that ninth SEC game, would that sort some things out? Sure, it would. Would you still have a 6-way tie for 4th place? Yeah, probably.
All right. So last question this week, Robert. I've been waiting all week to ask you this. You've got Texas, you got USC, you got a number of schools saying, we're done with the spring football game and we're going to have NFL style OTAs, activities. What do you think, man? Will we miss spring games, or get busy living, get busy dying?
I've never been to a spring game in my life. So am I personally going to miss them? No, I am not. I mean, it's a byproduct of the era in which we live, right? Because you have roster turnover, because you have people in the portal, you have people coming and going. You may or may not have people on campus. I know what coaches are going to say. They're going to say, "Oh, well, we don't have enough guys. We can't effectively practice. We can't do this. We can't do that." And it may be, maybe it's this. Maybe it's they just need to take something off of their plates. With everything that's come on their plates with NIL and all that stuff, maybe they just need to take something off their plates. And this is easy, because I really don't think anybody's going to care. And you have people who are huge fans of schools. If Texas just has like a fan showcase where they, you have people showing off their skills, they're going to have 25,000 people show up to watch kids kick.
Do camp drills.
Yeah. That's what's going to happen. So I mean, do I think it's a big deal? No, I don't. It's going to be interesting to see if the smaller schools still kind of go along with that.
Well, part of the reason is because of the recruiting aspect, and you'll be amazed at how many people are in the spring portal after the spring game and say, "Ooh, that kid's got better." And somebody makes contact with somebody who makes contact with somebody, and now you're leaving school A to transfer to school B. So organized team activities may be the way to go. And that also could help NIL, because similar to the wrestling conventions, you can have your little table and sign your little shirt and take your little picture and make your little cash or whatever. Yep. All right. Well, this has been fun, man. Thank you so much. So on behalf of our favorite administrator, Robert Abney, I'm Dr. Keith Adams saying thank you for listening and or watching the Odd Coaches podcast, and we'll see you on the sidelines. Until next time, take care.
The Odd Coaches podcast is sponsored by the CKA Save Project. The CKA Save Project is an industry leader in providing student-athlete academic and athletic support. From assessing student-athletes' academic and athletic skills, to measuring and monitoring student-athlete academic progress, to improving student-athlete time management and organizational skills, the CKA Save Project provides wraparound services for student-athletes from middle school through college. For more information, visit us on the web at www.ckasaveproject.org or schedule a free consultation with Dr. Keith Adams by emailing cka@ckasaveproject.org. We hope you enjoyed today's show. The Odd Coaches podcast drops new episodes every Tuesday through Friday on most weeks. Make sure you subscribe to the Odd Coaches podcast on Apple Music, iHeartRadio, Podbean, Spotify, and YouTube. Follow the Odd Coaches podcast on Twitter and Instagram at Odd Coaches. Follow Dr. Adams on Twitter and Instagram at CKA Save Project. In addition, follow Coach Mike Francis on Twitter and Instagram at Coach Franchise, spelled Coach FRANCHIZE. For more information about the CKA Save Project, please visit them on the web at www.ckasafeproject.org. See you next time on the Odd Coaches Podcast.